Hello and welcome to the Golf Pro Show. My name is Gary Shaw. We are into episode 10 now, and with me, as always, is Liam Grehan, all the way from South Africa. And we have a very special
Actually,
guest
not. I'm in
today.
Zimbabwe.
Oh, sorry, I can't keep up with you. And also, from another end of the world, Jamie McConnell is with us. But a local man, an Irish man, currently in Dubai and will be jetting off soon to Portugal, I believe. But yeah, Jamie, if you want to introduce yourself and tell us who you are and what you're about, and
Oh, this is the bit I always hate.
yeah,
From Navan originally, and worked down your neck of the woods in Mullingar for quite a long time in New
yeah,
Forest, and I'm a very simple golf pro. I teach golf. Official title being director of instruction, but I'm a golf teacher by trade, and I've done that pretty much full time for about nearly 15 years now. Um, Based out in Dubai and split my year between here and Portugal. I work for a company called Discovery or Discovery Land, which kind of they have basically private golf courses, and I'm basically the director of instruction here in Discovery Dunes, which is just about to open in November, and then also in Costa Terra, which has been open for a couple of years in Portugal. So
They're unbelievable. From my time in the States, I remember a few people talking about going to stay at some of the Discovery Land properties, and like, I don't think people in Ireland understand how good they actually are. It's like it's the next level. It's next level. Mm.
yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of even when I started, because I started in April last year, and obviously our golf course was nowhere near built or ready, and we're just working out of an office, and people are trying to explain this to me, and you're like, yeah, yeah, okay, I'm sure it's good. Like I've seen good
Mm.
golf courses before, and I've seen like 5 star and all of that, but you
It's
really, until I arrived in Portugal and seen it firsthand, it's like nobody can really explain it to you. Like you have
there's
to,
5 star and then there's that.
yeah.
It's another level above.
And I think what's interesting about the way they do it is they kind of define it as like casual 5 star. So it's not fine dining and like white gloves. It's just everything is there for you, and like you can make the most of it in whatever way you like, really.
Mm. Unbelievable.
class, yeah. If we were to rewind back a little bit, so you said you were working. I think me and Liam will remember when you were in New Forest in Tyrrell's Pass.
But
Was that your first
technically,
gig, or where was it before that?
I just said technically Jamie was my first boss.
Yeah.
I was about 15. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. So I learned a lot. I learned a lot.
Sorry, say the question again.
Yeah. So where was where was your first gig, like as a PGA pro? Where did it all begin? And I know we know you from New Forest. Well, I know you from New Forest, and
I suppose
where was it before
my
that?
first profession, like I tried to play. I basically that was my dream all along, and I find it very funny looking back on it now, because like I remember a time when I was really young, and I genuinely thought as a child growing up like I could beat Tiger Woods someday, which looking back at it now from where I stand and knowing most of the guys, I'm like that was just never really an achievable goal, and probably the main reason that I kind of was able to think of that at the time, and without really realizing, was I'd never really played at the level that I should have played with, to understand just how good people were. And bear in mind, I obviously grew up. I'm the same age as Rory, so under 15s, under 18s, it was always Rory was
Mm.
basically winning everything.
Mm.
Um, and I think at the time I just didn't realize quite how good Rory was. And you
Yeah.
look at it now and you're like, okay, yeah, it was fairly obvious. But you have that kind of naivety of like, yeah, someday I'm going to beat Tiger Woods, and it's just as simple as that. And I
Yeah.
remember going for lessons and explaining that to pros and things like that. But my starting point was really playing. I tried to turn pro on my 18th birthday. I went
Mm.
to the first Euro Pro qualifier then. I failed miserably, and basically tried to play for about 3 years until I started to run out of cash. And by run out of cash, I mean go into a significant amount of debt with the AIB bank,
Well,
on car loans, which I never actually bought a car for. Um, and essentially, the only way I could keep it going was to start working within golf, which is where I started with the PGA.
Mm.
First
brilliant.
my first official job, like not just helping out in a pro shop, because I suppose that was like 13, 14 years old, but my first official job was in Elm Green Golf Club,
Oh,
basically
okay.
picking up golf balls on probably the busiest driving range on the planet. And then the company I worked for, Car Golf at the time, they took over my home club, which was Navan Golf Club, and they, for some reason, gave me the trust of running that pro shop. But the only deal was that I had to get a qualified pro, to work effectively kind of under me. So I was managing it, but I needed a pro that I could.
So you could do your PGA
to do my PGA.
Brilliant.
So he was
Brilliant.
working under me, even though I was like 20. I think I was 21 or something at the time. So I ended up in there. So it was a real weird dynamic running a shop, but you're training under somebody. And then eventually they took over New Forest and Moy Valley when kind of the troubles hit in like 2008, 2009, something like that. And I ended up down in New Forest. And to be honest, New Forest is kind of where I fell in love with, I suppose, just working in golf, and just really fell in love with the teaching side of things. There was a really good committee. The members were brilliant. Like, they always had my back, even though obviously I worked for Car Golf at the time, and they weren't massively liked, because obviously they were coming in to make changes and make the club more functional and make it monetarily kind of function. But everybody there was so good to me, and it's still to this day probably my favorite club that I worked in, despite working in my home club and working in some great other ones. And I just basically fell in love with teaching from that point, and began to kind of look. I got busier and busier as a coach, and then to the point that I didn't want to work in anything operational. Moved over to Spain to work. I ended up working there for 6 months. I didn't really enjoy that experience. I was a bit green and a bit naive again, and kind of had some bad experiences there, but met some great.
Was that at San Roque, Jamie, or that was the?
That was at Via Padierna, with the Jason.
Oh, yeah.
So
I know that range. Yeah.
But like, I remember the first week, and I had my passport, my laptop, my iPad all stolen. Had a temporary passport, police didn't care, all these things happened, and at the time I blamed Spain. I was like, Spain is terrible, this, that, and the other. To be honest, I was just naive. It was just pure, not used to traveling on your own, not used to living abroad. All of these things. Like, if you look back, and all of that was easily fixed. Moved back to Ireland and swore I'd never move abroad again. It was never.
How long did you do in Spain, Jamie?
About 6 months, 7 months.
Okay.
Moved back, and I knew I didn't want to go into a pro shop. I knew I wanted to teach, but didn't really know how. So I had a TrackMan, which I had bought with a car loan for €20,000, and I think I paid 1,000 for the car and 19 for the TrackMan. And basically said, I'm gonna try and set something up with this. So, because not many people had them. I think there was 6 or 7 TrackMan in Ireland at the time.
Wow.
You were one of the first. I remember when you bought it. You were like, there was very few around.
I was the first one with the T3 unit, which was the first modern version of it. The rest of them were those big ones, and this was the first
boxy ones,
portable one. Yeah. So I had bought that, and nobody taught with it. Everybody who had one was a fitter. So like Derek Murray had one, the guys in Foda had one, but they were all fitters. Nobody taught with it. And I was like, seeing guys like Joe Mayo and Andrew Rice coming out with it, and I was like, this would be cool. Someday this will be. So I ended up buying this TrackMan, went home, and basically set up this thing called the TrackMan Roadshow. And the idea was pretty simple. It was like, any pro or any golf club could rent me and the TrackMan for the day. If they wanted to use TrackMan themselves, they could use TrackMan. If they wanted me to either coach or fit with it, I would do it. If they wanted me to help them coach or fit with it, we could do that. It was very, very flexible. So I had some really good guys like Desi Morgan, then Dave Carney up in Dublin, and like loads of people started using this. And after about 6 months, I ended up filling, like, I think my busiest month was like 25 or 26 days. I was driving all over the country every morning.
Yeah.
Walking up on breakfast rolls and just traveling wherever I could. I had a great time, and it was cool because I got to watch different people teaching, and then I got to help people, and I got put in touch with different students, and it was just a really, really cool trip. And then unusually, JP, who was my ex-boss over here, but JP at the time I didn't know him. He had kind of picked up.
That's Justin Parsons, is it?
Justin, yeah. So Justin,
JP.
Sorry.
Just to keep everyone else.
But yeah, he was working for Butch Harmon here in Dubai at the time, running the academy here, and he had kind of picked up on me through a few different sources. One was another job over here, which I had actually applied for and gotten the job, and then they kind of talked me out of the job. And then some of the stuff I was doing at the roadshow and that, and he had picked up on my name, and he had randomly emailed me one morning, and I knew who he was. And he said, look, is there any chance we could have a chat today? And I said, yeah, look, no problem. And I just thought it was a question on Trackman because I was coaching with it at the time and it was popular and blah, blah, blah. And he just rang me and he goes, look, do you want a job? And that academy was one of 3 academies that I was dreaming of working in. Like complete, like they were just, there was him, there was the one in Dubai, there was Butch's one in Vegas, and there was David Ledbetter in Florida, and then Jim McLean at Doral as well. And I was like, if any of those academies kind of came to me, like I'd go.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget it. I remember just saying, yeah. And I didn't know what money I was going to, I didn't know where I was going to live. I didn't even know how I was going to get there because I was so broke at the time. And I had
Sorry, Jim. Were you finished in New Forest at this stage, or were you just on the road show?
Yeah, I was on my own.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
going around the
Just
country
doing
just
road show.
teaching.
Yeah.
And my best friend Ryan, who ran Kilcock at the time, Ryan Donaher, he's down in Australia now. He let me do a few hours in the shop, and he let me coach his members and stuff in Kilcock, and like that was again a lifeline for me at the time.
Yeah.
I don't think he'll ever realize how important that was for me, but it just kept me going. And
Brilliant.
yeah, like a month later, I was in Dubai, and that was the story. So it was a big
Wow.
I remember ringing my mum, and I rang her at like 8 o'clock one morning. She goes, "What do you want?" And I said, "I don't want anything." She goes, "What did you do?" And I go, "I did nothing." Why? And she goes, "You're moving abroad, aren't you?" And I'm like, "How did you know that?" I was like, she goes, "I just knew it. I knew you'd go again." And I was like, and I've never really. It was never meant to be even for very long. It was going to be. I always give the idea, at the time I thought I knew 90% of coaching, and I was effectively going over to figure out the last 10% with one of the best teachers in the world, Butch being legendary, and then even JP at the time was getting a lot of recognition. And then I landed here, and then I thought, I don't even know 10% of this. Like the level that these guys are at is different. And it was just such a shock.
Wow.
And yeah, I just kind of, it went from a year or two, and we're 12 years in now, and I still haven't left. So
Wow.
What percent do you think you're at now?
It seems to get less and less every year. The more I learn. I think that's the interesting bit.
Yeah. What initially struck you about them that was different when you went there?
I think
What
just
was
the
so obviously
standard
different?
that they do things too, because you're going from like, there's very few full-time coaches in Ireland to begin. So you don't, and very few that I had even met. So you're like, you don't really know what it is. There's no real, at the time there wasn't. Now there's a couple more. So you have like Johnny obviously up north, and there's a few academies, but you didn't really have a proper academy, and we didn't really have any high-end ones. So like all of it was new. And you just realize like every little thing they do from the moment the student walks in the door is just a little bit better. You know what I mean? Like you go in and they'll physically screen you, so they put you through a TPI screen. Then they'll link that to a fitness trainer and go, well, his hip's not working, so why don't you go into the trainer for a session every week, and we'll do a lesson every second week. And then you're like, okay, and then they come in and really simple things like they video you. First session, you get videoed, and we have a baseline, and they're not just trying to work off a model of a swing. It's not like, okay, here's Tiger Woods, do this. It's like, well, your screen says you can do this physically. You can't do this, so we need to work around this. Like, how do we do it? And it was just very holistic in comparison to like,
Brilliant.
For me, the idea was always just get a lesson, get better, get a lesson, get better. And that was it. And I think, I always go back to the probably the only person that I went to back in the day that really, I suppose, went out of the box was probably someone like Dave Carney. He tried to tackle a lot of different things from like skill,
Class.
to, like, how I thought, and like I didn't value it enough at the time. I remember going to lessons and thinking, oh, that was a bit airy fairy, and I look back now and I'm just like, I should have bought into it, and I didn't. I don't know why to this day. It was just like the cool thing was technique, and copy Tiger and Adam swing because they're the best in the world, and that was it.
Yeah, he trained
Amazing,
with Manship, I think, was it Royal County Down or Royal Dublin?
Manchip was in Carton at that stage. He just started as Irish coach, I think, at that stage.
Yeah, I think they're similar in teaching style. I'm not sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So when you went over,
Jamie, what did you?
Go ahead, Lynn.
I'll let you go, Gary. My internet in Zimbabwe is a little bit behind here, so forgive me. It's not the quickest. But Jamie, I suppose like you obviously had a lot of time on Trackman, on the roadshow and on that, but I'm sure over time your coaching probably changed how like maybe it's like at the start when you're coaching, you're looking at a lot of numbers and like you can probably see in a golf swing instantly and see what the ball flight's going to do before even looking at your TrackMan now. Do you find the coaches go down that rabbit hole, or how did you use it as a tool to help your players get better without getting too bogged down?
Yeah, like look, at the beginning, I went like deep dive into the numbers.
Mm,
At that stage, every number had something to do with it. But you kind of realize now just how linked they all are. Generally, if somebody's
yeah.
very inside, it's rare you're going to see them massively steep on it. You can kind of make little kind of modifications that way. I
Mm,
think the thing I've realized about technology over the years is probably that effectively everything is a tool. So whether it's a
mm,
TrackMan, whether it's a KVS, whether it's an AMM, whether it's an alignment stick and a foam swimming noodle, like they're all just tools. And I think the really good coaches can, number one, pull the right tool at the right time, and then number two,
mm.
they could probably use any tool to fix you. So like if I give Butch a
Yeah, yeah.
TrackMan or I give him a stick, he'll know what to do with both. And I think
Yeah,
that's what really good coaching is. It's actually way more down
absolutely.
to the understanding of it and the communication of it. And I think,
Mm.
when you start out, you just think everything's like a magic trick. It's like, track,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
oh, like this is everything's shiny and new. And
Mm.
I look at it now, and like people are really into TrackMan, and you have to kind of almost build yourself up to go, all right, let's look at the figures. Even though in your head you could call the numbers out like almost on the
Yeah.
street. You could tell them the number
Mm.
based on what the ball's doing because you've seen it so much, but
So many
they don't
times, yeah.
know that, and like they like it. So it's like you have to use that.
Mm.
He goes, look, I'd love to know my TrackMan figures better. I'm like, all right, it's 2 in, 3 in. It's like, I don't know, like, come on, let's give it the time, and let's kind of give them a little bit of what they want, because at the end of the day,
Mm.
there's very few people that ultimately, like, if you take every golf coach in the world, there's a very, very, very small percentage that are going to teach people where their career relies on this and their life relies on this. So I
Mm.
think, the one thing that I always think is like, no matter who it is, they have to enjoy the golf lesson. Doesn't matter if they're the best in the
Absolutely.
world or if they're Mrs. Smith trying to get it off the ground. And I think
Yeah.
that's what really good coaches are able to do at every level, like whether it's Butch or whether it's, I always remember the
Mm.
stories of his brother Billy, and, Mrs. Smith is topping it off the tee and Billy's there going, wow, that was great. And he's just so enthusiastic. He walks away and he comes back next week and he's loving it. It's just figuring out what it is that they need to get out of it, right?
Brilliant. Yeah. So I suppose the most important thing with clients and getting people better is if they enjoy it, they'll come back, they'll practice, they'll work on it. It's like more than knowing that they're two on the inside. If they're actually enjoying the game, getting better, and doing it that way, it's that's what I would take from what you're saying there.
Yeah, definitely. And it's also getting on their wavelength, right? Like some people actually just want to swing it better and they don't really care about their score. Like there's one student of mine
Yeah.
who hired Mac O'Grady and did a lot of like
Wow.
years of work with him and just kept bringing him over and back. And to be honest, his golf didn't really improve, but his swing looked fantastic. And
Mm.
it used to be a real battle in my head because anytime he'd come to me, I'd want to improve his golf, and I'd be like, okay, but like I know you're trying this, but it's not really working, so let's do this. And then after a while, you kind of realize actually the project in his head is he wants to master this swing, and you kind of have to
Mm.
indulge and go down the rabbit hole and see if you can figure out how to make the swing and the performance work together. And you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's a little what they want, a little what they need. It's trying to find that balance is the really difficult part as a golf coach. But ultimately,
Mm.
it's enjoyment, and if his enjoyment is swinging, like Tiger Woods, then who am I to judge what that enjoyment is?
Yeah. 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 He's
I
not
said
playing
this.
for his living. It's a different story.
He's not playing for his living.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
He's
Mm.
not,
I
but he
said I
does.
said this in
If you ever
a
look at his iPad, he has this iPad, and
Mm.
there has to be at least 15,000 videos from Mac O'Grady on that. Like that, if he
wow.
ever sold the laptop, like the iPad,
We'd
every
get a fortune for it.
coach in the world would probably buy it.
Mm.
But he
Wow.
never
Mm.
will. It's just his passion, it's his love, and
Yeah.
for to do it, and it's cool, right? Like if we can
Mm.
do
Yeah.
it.
I was saying this a few times on the previous pods. Like where I'm coaching is all indoor golf and it's all TrackMan as well. But I've many clients who don't have a handicap. They may have never played outdoors. They may never hit a golf ball outdoors like at all. Never mind a driving range like. And
Mm.
they're happy out. Like they just want to play on TrackMan indoors and hit balls. They just want to hit balls. Like,
Hit it better.
and just
To
hit
be
it
honest,
straighter.
I
Yeah.
almost think of it like a different game now. Like it's,
Yeah.
to me, it's like, okay, both are golf, but it's almost like the way they changed cricket into like T20. You know what I mean? They're the same like physical game, the same function, but actually the skill sets are a bit different. The way you got to play it, the strategies, they're all different. And like I have to say, one of the, like I'm kind of in the same boat as you because I've been limited for the last year to I've only got one indoor simulator, which is the TrackMan IO system. And my first month after using it, I was just so bored. I'm just like I'm sick of looking at a screen. And then I thought I really have to figure out how I can use this to my advantage. And then I started looking into like the TrackMan Golf app, and I started to get all of our guys in and get them on the handicaps thing. So now people who have never played golf now actually have a handicap
Yeah.
on track. And then all of a sudden the app starts populating with the data, and now they have all the distances because TrackMan gives distances automatically. Then they start asking about like, oh my, I'm not hitting any fairways. How can I get better at this? I'm like, oh well, when you come in, we'll set you up on the performance center. Your job is hit 10 shots and you make a game. And it just started to like really unravel then. And it was like, this is actually quite cool. This is, people who
Brilliant.
are living in the city and don't really have the time to get out, they're still able to get better at this and improve. And yes, there's still a chunk missing for when they hit off grass and are on their own, but actually there's so much you can do with it. And it really amazed me. We're about to launch this thing within our club, and essentially it's getting all of the Discovery clubs together, and where anybody with an indoor simulator can enter a Discovery tournament that's closed to
Oh, cool.
and again, people in Dubai can play against people in, wherever, Hawaii or, Mexico or, we've got members all over the place. And some of them even have their own TrackMan. So all of a sudden you've got leaderboards.
Oh, cool.
Flying around. It's really
That's
cool.
great.
I have to say the app
Builds a club.
together is amazing.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you see the link that they're making with Upgame and what they're planning on bringing forward is like, it's fantastic. It's cool to see.
Yeah. Yeah. Caddy Club where I was coaching, there's 3 locations there, and each location they'll all play against each other like as one caddy club and create tournaments within each location and then against each location. So you can do loads of things like that. Yeah, it's brilliant. Like,
And even how they're integrating, like you look at them doing that junior tour and stuff, like worldwide from TrackMan. And like I'm like, that's pretty. Like anybody who's in a cold country, like imagine you're in Sweden in the middle of winter, and like all you have is indoor bays. It's like at least something to keep you interested and keep you moving.
Yeah,
Keep you competitive rather than just hitting balls, over and over and over again into a net.
yeah. It's in Ireland.
So Jamie, I suppose like Jamie, you've exposed yourself to like so many high-end coaches, high-end players. Is there anything like I'm coming from a player's side now? When you're watching a lot of the players come through and working with them, what did you pick up on like their habits, attitudes, practice kind of habits, or what would you notice that was different from your normal, even elite players, the tour players that come through? Like, what did you spot that was different?
Do you know what? I don't know if I could give you a commonality.
They all had their own.
All completely different. And like, there's some that I loved from a personal side, and then there's some that I'm like, how does he do it? Like it's like, contrasting. Like I look at like Lee Slattery he had a great approach to practice. So if he was here on a practice week, he would think of it like a 9 to 5 job. So he would turn up at 9 o'clock. He would practice until 10, stop and have a 15-20 minute tea break, work till 12:30, have lunch. Then he would go back to it. Same thing, tea break in the middle of the afternoon, finish at 5, go home to the family. That was it, and he'd do that 5 days a week. Weekends with the family. 9 to 5, just like you would in a normal job. And then you look at other ones, and you look at guys like, I always found Brooks really interesting. Like, you look at how short some of his warm-ups are. Like, he'd just stand up, hit a few balls, go to the range, or go to the chipping green, hit a few chips, a few putts, bang. And I remember there was one practice session. It was partially because he was sick. I think it was like Mexico or something. It was somewhere hot. And like he was sick. And I think his warm-up session was like 20 minutes. Wow. And he was just trying to conserve energy. You know what I mean? And like, again, you see so many different scenarios. I definitely think the guys who are my favorite ones, you see like Tiger. I think what's interesting about Tiger is there's like a real intention on shots. Even if he's
Yeah.
hitting 7-irons, they won't often be the same 7-iron twice in a row. Like he'll hit it with a little fade, and then he'll hit it with a little draw, and then you know what I mean. Like there's a shot in play all the time, and I think that's really really good. But
It's
I
like he's
think
playing golf on the driving range more than swing.
yeah. But like the perfect example I give you, I always remember being at the Ryder Cup in Paris, and it was the practice day, and the whole European tour, or sorry, the whole European team was on the range, and there was Molinari, Justin Rose, and Alex Noren standing side by side by side. Justin Rose basically had an alignment stick there for playing, and he had a 7-iron, and he hit rep, just like rapid fire. He must have hit 100 balls in less than an hour, like just one after another. Never changed club, never changed target, never changed the drill. Like it was just one. Then you had Alex Noren. He'd do 10 of these wild practice swings, like the big bizarre one where he'd drop it inside.
Yeah.
He was practicing driver. He'd hit the ground 3 feet before the ball. And like he kept practicing that, and I'm like, what is he doing? And then he'd hit one ball, and then he'd do 10 more reps of this crazy practice swing and hit one ball. And you're like, okay, that's a bit odd. And then you look at Molinari, and Molinari talked. I don't know if you know who Dave Alred is, but Dave Alred was coach.
Performance.
He used to coach Luke Donald as well, coach Johnny Wilkinson in rugby. You know, a really cool guy. And
I think Harrington worked with him as well.
Dave would be standing there looking at he's small. Yeah. So he'd be there with his little notebook out, and they have TrackMan set up behind him. And Molinari would stand up, and he'd hit a shot, and then you'd see Dave just squiggling something down. And then he went and hit a shot for another 5-6 minutes, and then he'd stand up again, and he'd have a wedge, and he'd hit a completely different direction. They'd have moved the TrackMan and moved everything else. He'd stand up and hit another shot, and then Dave would squiggle something down, and he kept doing this. Like he must have hit maybe 10 balls in an hour, like not many more.
Jeez.
And a year or two later, I'd met Dave properly, and I was lucky enough to spend some time with him. And I remember asking him, I'm like, can I ask you what you were doing? He's like, we were playing the golf course. Like, what do you mean? He's like, every shot he hit was a shot he was going to play on the course. So like the first shot he hit was basically the 2-iron he was going to hit off the first tee. And then the second shot was the 8-iron he was going to in. And we basically set it up on TrackMan. And effectively what he was doing was playing the golf course, and we were marking it down. So we were trying to get him into the intensity of a tournament and get him to picture the shots and do all of this. And I was like, geez, that's pretty impressive. And Dave had some really cool stuff, but like I always remember looking at those three and like, if you ever wanted the perfect example of like there's no one way of doing it, like those three were it. And I think the same goes in swing. Like you ever see that picture of the European Tour backswings where they show like DJ and Lowry and Daniel Berg, and like you've got that span of guys who are really laid off to like perfect at the top to all the way across the line. You're like, there's just no one way of doing it. You're like, it's horses for courses, and it's way more about finding your best way and the best way you function rather than necessarily going, okay, this works, yeah, let's do that. He does it well, let's copy him.
With that in mind, Jamie, just what do you think about systems like I've kind of delved into stack and tilt and the Morad and a bit of Mac O'Grady and things like that. When somebody has some sort of a system or thing like that, what do you feel about that kind of thing? Are you open to
I
it?
think they're interesting because there's some great coaches use them and some great swingers. Like you look at someone like a Robert Rock, and you know what I mean. He's obviously based on kind of stack and tilt and Mac.
Golf
like,
machine.
Number one, plays unbelievably with it, and then number two, he coaches it unbelievably to players. So I'm like, how could you ever knock a system like that? But then equally, you look at probably the other end of the scale, and you look at a Butch, and you go, okay, well, how do you coach Ricky Fowler, Phil Mickelson, Dustin Johnson, Tiger Woods? Yeah. Like, they couldn't be further from each other. So it's like, well, which is right? Well, I think the commonality is probably comes down to kind of what I was saying to you before the call is like, you know, you communicate. And I always remember Dennis Pugh saying it, and he said something along the lines of, you can give me any system and I'll be able to make it work.
Yeah.
He goes, I just know how to coach. And I'm like,
brilliant.
It's probably true. And I think, you know, for most sports, you know, I'd say you could probably put, I don't want to say this too lightly, but, you know, if you put a great coach in another sport, okay, maybe they can't coach it to the level of somebody who's experienced in that particular sport, but they'd probably figure out things you can improve. You know what I mean? You put a Ruben Amorim maybe into, I don't know, Gaelic football. He'd probably figure out the system and kind of be able to do something with it. And he'd probably know enough about the conditioning around it and blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? And I think great coaches like really are really good at communicating. So if you take like a stack and tilt, and you look at the guys who designed that, like they're great communicators. If you ever watch them teach it, it's amazing. Like you watch Mike and that, like they're fantastic. And it's having that ability to get a message across. Is there stuff that I like and don't like within methods? 100%. There's stuff that I absolutely hate seeing. But are they right or are they wrong? Well, some of the guys that I hate teach to a far higher level than I've reached. So can I knock them? Probably not.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If they're successful with it and they know how to get it across, it's one of those things where how could you ever knock somebody for that? So I think it's far more about your knowledge of the system, whatever system it is, like knowing it really, really well, and then being able to communicate that message across.
Do you feel like you're pulling from all different angles when you're coaching someone? Like it's not just one system or anything like that?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Like I said, look, I have preferences. There's things that I like in a swing and things that I don't. But then you've also got to pivot for, different people move different ways, and different people have different preferences about how to move, and some people like the feel of some things. And then sometimes you'll make something look really pretty and they'll hit it terrible. Like hit it absolutely. Like I always remember there was one of the kids that I teach, Toby. He's over in the States, and I'll never forget when he was like 14, 15. He was young. And like we worked on this swing, and I remember it looked so good. Like he had like a Tiger Woods-ish position at the top, and he was a kid who was really like trending in the right way. He was winning tournaments, doing really well at his age groups, just building. And I'll never forget this day. I remember being in the studio and looking at this position, the whole swing, and I was like, "This is perfect," and the ball just went sideways every time. And I remember, like the only thing I could do, so I remember going home that night and I was so upset because like he hit it awful and he hit it awful for the next week. And I was like, what am I doing? I'm like, it looks so good. Like, why is it wrong? And I spent ages trying to figure out why it was wrong. And then eventually came to the conclusion of, well, let's just hit shots and see what he can control a shot with, see what that looks like, and then use that as his model going forward. So I basically ended up getting him to kind of fade the ball the next week. And the way he would do it, he ended up with like a bit of bow on his wrist. It would be quite short, definitely short of parallel, like nowhere near where it was the week before. But he ripped it, and he went out a week later and ended up winning the tournament. And then he went on this streak of playing really well. And we kind of came up with a couple of things that we said we'd never change. So like we said, the club can never get behind him, and we can never let the face get to square or open. It has to be slightly on the closed side. And we said they were like no matter what happens, we're not allowed to change these things. Everything else is up for discussion, but these things kind of work. And we never really went away from that. They were always kind of two keys that we stuck with, but it didn't look as pretty. It was a bit unconventional. It was a bit short. He looked a bit tight. Face was a bit closed, and it just wasn't. It didn't, like I say at the time, look great, but it worked.
They were two great matchups, though, weren't they? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's it. And again, it's that. I suppose one is knowledge, and then two is confidence to deliver it. But you kind of need to go through a few of those to figure it out. And look, sometimes you might not. Sometimes you mess them up, and that's the worst bit. You know what I mean? Is that sometimes you don't get that extra week to fix somebody. Especially if you're dealing with a PGA Tour player. If they're struggling, you might get fired.
Yeah.
And you just can't live with it.
Yeah.
Spending time, obviously, you were in the Butch Harmon school. So, obviously, Justin Parsons worked with lots of tour players, Claude and Butch. Did you get to spend a lot of time with these lads? Like, how did the time you spent with them influence your coaching and, your beliefs on golf?
Oh, massively. I was, I was in the enviable position of I probably had three of the best coaches in the world above me. Do you know what I mean? If you went to at the time, my immediate boss was Justin, who now coaches God knows how many PGA Tour players over in Sea Island. He's had some amazing success with Brian Harmon and a bunch of other guys. Able to learn from him and see what he does day to day, and he was kind of a big proponent at the time of including a lot of physical stuff. He really went to understand the body, understand TPI, and kind of integrate that into his coaching. But then he was always super willing to look at a lot of other coaches. He was very close with Pete Cowan, looked at a lot of his stuff, and he'd come into I used to love when he'd come into the office with ideas, And he'd
Class.
come in, he'd be like, okay, so the shoulder, right shoulder needs to do this, and we need to try this, and let's go outside, and he'd bring you outside, and we'd try stuff, and like it'd be terrible, because we were the worst models in the world. The two of us couldn't, you know what I mean? We just hit it awful sometimes, and you'd be like, oh no, that doesn't work. Let's try it on someone else, and like this is what we did, and he was such a good like, as far as a leader goes, like he was amazing. He was great to work under and like super encouraging and but he was really really into it and had a huge perspective on it. Then you'd also Claude and with Claude early on I didn't know him that well, like my first kind of 2 years there, and I started to really get to know Claude when I went to Florida for a week, and he was brilliant. He let me stay in his house and brought me up to the academy every day, and we'd stop at Starbucks on the way, and like Claude's way of teaching is just it's lovely to hear. It's just loads of stories and like he really gets into he loves the playing side of it. And he loves like replicating practice and play and like
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
blueprint stuff, but just a great like playing coach, great manager of like players. You watch how he manages teams where you've got multiple coaches and things and that, and then to be around that, you start to see that side of things. You're like, okay, like how do I get them to play better? Like forget the swing stuff. Some of the best lessons I seen him give were the simplest lessons, and he would always be thinking of it like, how do I get them to just get their scores lower? Take away double bogeys, one shape, one miss. Like these were all the things that Claude would throw at us. And again, Claude with us as a team was so engaging. He'd come over to Dubai for a week at a time. And just spend the entire week with the team. He didn't really want any social engagement in the calendar apart from maybe meeting the members. He just would sit and watch us teach. And
Brilliant.
then he'd jump in and he'd give us an idea, and then he'd jump out and then he'd just sit back and watch. And like he was great. And then with Butch, I got to, I'll never forget the British Open at Carnoustie, and got to walk 18 holes with him, and had one of the most embarrassing scenarios in my life where I offered to get him a coffee. And he walked over to the coffee van with me while we were waiting, and I accidentally handed in 5 dirhams rather than £5 because they're the same colour. And obviously the guy in the van's pulled me up, and he's gone, "What is this?" And he's like, "Oh, it's Monopoly." Butch goes, "It's Monopoly money. Don't trust him. Don't here. I'll get these. I'll get these." And I swear he didn't let me hear the end of it.
Brilliant.
He's like, "Don't trust him with the money," and like, but Butch was unbelievable to watch. Like how much could say to get the point across. It was just like, it was incredible. And like to see the passion that he has, like, and there's a video on YouTube. It's him delivering a 2-hour talk to the Californian PGA, and then he did an extra hour sit down with Michael Breed, and like at this stage he was really struggling with his back, like he was in agony. Talked on stage with no slides for 2 hours. Brilliant. And then you could see him after that. He had to sit down with Michael. He could barely get down to the couch. He was struggling so much, but he loved it and he wouldn't stop. And that was pretty much like when Butch retired. Nobody really believed he retired, and he kind of hasn't, right? Like you see guys like Rory going up to him, Hideki,
Tommy Fleetwood,
like they just go up to him now instead of him coming out on tour. But he just loves it, and he's the GOAT, right? Like nobody will. I can't imagine anybody beating the record he's had with players. And like how many and the level he's gotten to, and you're like, it's amazing to see like just how much he loves it to this day, and he just loves talking golf, and he's a really cool guy to look up to.
Yeah, watching him coach, Jamie, was there anything that really stood out? He said very little, and a lot got through. He just right things, right time.
Just simple. He kept it so simple, and I'm in a very unusual position in that in 2006. I was lucky enough to get invited to the Red Bull Masterclass, which was down in Druids Heath. And basically, the four Harmon brothers, so Butch, Dick, Bill, and Craig, basically spent 3 days with us, taught us, hung out with us as kids. And then we had a tournament at the end, and they ended up winning the tournament. And,
nice.
But yeah, like Butch basically at that time was able to teach me. And I remember I was really stuck on, I was like a 4 handicap at the time, and I just couldn't get off. I couldn't get lower than it. And then I think I got to like scratch within 6 months after that. Like he said one thing to me about takeaway, and that's all I did for 6 months, and then all of a sudden it just works. And you're like, this is bizarre. Even that tournament, I remember winning that tournament. And it was just like, I've beaten some serious players here. Like I was rooming with Paul Cutler that week, who I didn't know until that event, and you're like, how do you beat these people when you've really no right to? Like Paul was playing off like +2 at the time from Portrush, and I was off 4 and like chopping it around.
One of the
Navan.
best amateurs Ireland
And
ever
like
had.
it's yeah, amazing, like unbelievable. And I hit a 1 iron around Drew's Heath all week because I hit the driver so sideways. But again, it's just there's something that they have in them, like that whole family from Butch, Dick, Bill, and Craig, and then
Brilliant.
include Claude in that now as well. And there's just something special about the whole family. You can only admire it. And the interesting thing is Butch's 3 brothers were all just as good at coaching, just all different,
Wow.
all different. And yeah, they're a really, really cool family and really cool history they've had with all the players they've worked with.
I've read the book about Butch's dad, Claude, and like the
Pro-
time with Ben Hogan and all that. Like they were just so they grew up in such an interesting environment with his dad being the pro at Winged Foot and just being a PGA Tour player. So like Butch obviously comes from the playing side and married up with the coaching. It's just like no one could be as good a coach as that,
Yeah. No, and it's amazing. Like you think of it, Claude obviously, watched Greg Norman and Tiger Woods.
Yeah.
Like
You're going to pick up a thing or two there.
yeah, exactly. And it's you see the stories, and again, like as much as the background and the history of the family is amazing, like how much they all love it. Still to this day, I think that's the one thing with all of them that I realize is that they all absolutely love golf and golf coaching. Like they live and breathe golf coaching, and it doesn't matter who you put on the tee in front of them, they'll give a good golf lesson, and they'll be into it. And Butch used to always say to us, like, make your last lesson as good as your first lesson. Meaning that if you've had 10 lessons in a day, the person paying for the 8 p.m. session with you is paying the same amount as the guy paying the 8 a.m. one. You better give the same service. It better be good. Make sure you make a difference and you make them enjoy it and you make them better. And like that was always their big thing, was just every lesson needs to be really, really good. And you know what I mean? They taught me so much over the kind of 10, 11 years I worked with them.
Yeah.
It's obviously changed quite a bit now. For like, obviously you left the Butch Harmon school and now you're at Discovery Dunes. How does you're obviously working with different types of players. There's members, so you're probably doing less volume, but they're still very obviously very important lessons too. How is that on a day to day for you?
It's quite nice. It's different. Like I suppose and I was actually talking to one of my old coaches earlier on today, Graham, about this. And Graham works with Claude now, and Graham's a brilliant, brilliant coach. But I was actually chatting to him, and he asked kind of a similar question, and I suppose the answer is very simply, you get to put a bit more time into it. You're not thinking. I don't want to say thinking on the clock because that sounds bad, but you're not thinking right. Like if I'm given a 50-minute lesson, I have kind of roughly the guide of how it goes in my head. I'm like, okay, first 10, 15 minutes is assessing, talking, watching, listening. Then you start to kind of diagnose, and you're like, okay, what are we going to work on? You get to the kind of half-hour mark, and you're like, ideally you want them to stop for a minute or two and just kind of relax and just not keep hitting. Then you go into the next kind of 10, 15 minutes. You want to keep going at it, maybe alter the shots a bit, and then the last 10 minutes is kind of the wrap-up, and you kind of have this in your head. I suppose the luxury that I have in working with with Discovery is there isn't that time limit. Like our only job is just make the members enjoy it. And if that takes you an hour and that takes you 2 hours, it doesn't really matter. It's very rare I'd have back-to-back lessons. And then the second luxury is we have a golf course that's relatively empty by most golf courses comparison. So, if I finish off a lesson and it went really well after an hour and 10 minutes and I have nobody after, I can go to them, do you want to go out and play a couple of? We'll go play 9 and, we can whiz around in an hour in the buggies, and, it just gives a different perspective on what you can do. And it also lets you kind of study a bit more, again, one of the things I brought up, it's nice to have some time in a day to look at different people and different things. I think when you're teaching constantly, it's very difficult to kind of go away and study things, whether that be other coaches, other techniques. Like after this call, I've actually got one of the TrackMan webinars that I wanted to watch, and on Hugh Maher.
Hugh Maher, yeah, it's good.
And it's just nice having that little bit of extra time to try and improve your own coaching. Like even if you know a lot of it, you just pick up on one thing and two things, and I think that's really, really important to kind of do, and it's something I've always loved learning. Doing a master's now has been fun in sports psychology, and you feel like a complete beginner as much as you've done some sports psychology before. You're like, oh, these guys, it's like day one at the Butch Harmon again. It's like these guys are on a different level. They're 6 steps ahead of me. You're like going, you know what I mean? Yeah, they do this because of this, and this, and you're on step one, and you're like, what? It's like amazing stuff. You're just seeing everything whiz by your eyes, and you're like, okay, yeah, I got it. So yeah, effectively to go back to your question, what does it look like? Well, I get a lot more time to kind of both plan and digest their lessons and kind of learn a bit. I've got a lot more freedom with what I can do with them. And yeah, I think I really enjoy it. It's just different. But then I also loved like the pressure of like trying to deliver a really, really good golf lesson in an hour to a lot of people. Like, it was fun, and I think there's time for both. When you're trying to get reps in at the beginning is, that 10 hours a day, 7 days a week for 5 years was great. But I look at it now and like I don't think I'll be able to do it again. I just don't.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's the kind of silk sheets thing. It's like it's hard to get out of bed when you're in silk sheets. It's quite a nice place to be, really.
Brilliant.
So are they your clients, Jamie, or are you just providing a service to the members?
They're either members or members guests. Okay. So our clubs are private, closed off to the public. Nobody can get in unless you're a member. And then those members can bring a guest with them or guests with them, and then they can basically sort that out. So basically all members and members guests. When I left Butch, I had to basically hand over all of my students to the guys who were there because I just couldn't bring them into where I was coaching. It was simple as that.
Yeah, so you're not marketing, looking for clients, things like that. That's all gone now.
No, don't do any of it.
Amazing. It's such a different perspective, but you've worked your way there, Jamie. That's the thing, and you're in one of the best facilities in the world now. Like, not that you weren't already, but it's to have the access to go from the range to the course, and like you can actually test what you worked on in the lesson on the golf course. Like that's a coach's dream, really, or like a player's dream working with a coach is to actually do it on the golf course. It's so hard to get that in a normal setting.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And like I say, when I was chatting to Graham, I was telling him it's like it's not good, it's not bad. It's like it's just different. And I loved every single one of the 11 years I was at Butch and Claude's place. I was like, there's a buzz to coming in, and like you've got some of the kids that we had come through that place where I'm like, and seeing where they are. Like we think we ended up with it by the time I left with about 30 kids who had gone to American scholarship, and you're like, wow, this is just amazing. See these kids going to that level, and how many of them were coming through, and there's a buzz to it. It's addicting. It's like you absolutely love it, and then this is just different. It's in a different way, but again, I suppose ultimately the goal is just you show up and you give a really good golf lesson and you give a really good experience, and ultimately it doesn't really matter who you're teaching, whether they're the best player in the world, the wealthiest guy in the world, or Mrs. Smith's just trying to get the ball 10 yards off the tee. You can get a kick out of any of them. I think that's the best part about coaching, is that it doesn't really matter who's in front of you. If you like coaching, you like coaching, and that's just it.
Helping someone get better.
The mental side of the game, like to psychology, you're doing a master's in now. How do you see that seeping into your lessons? Like, has that changed your perspective of the lesson or how you deliver it? Or
it's kind of interesting. I half expected to go in and just know more about people in front of me and be able to, I suppose, get into more, into more depth with them. Right. And I think I've actually gone the other way and gone, it's making me look at me way more than I was looking at the person in front of me. And that, wow. And I mean that in the smallest sense. Like, I mean, body language. Like we did a week at the GA campus in Blanche last week, and one of the guys was talking about body language, and he's like, he used one of the girls as an example. He's like, she wants to get out of this conversation, and we were like, what do you mean? He's like, look at her, she wants to get out of the conversation. What's giving it away? And we're looking at her. She wasn't particularly defensive. She was looking at him, but her feet were pointing away, and she's like, feet never lie. The feet tell you where they want to go, even if they're facing. And I'm like, even now this week, I'm standing like talking to people, and I'm like, I have to make sure like I'm pointing forward. And it sounds so stupid. I started noticing it with conversations I wanted to get out with. My feet are pointing the other direction. They're looking at the floor.
Yeah.
And just in how you deal with people, like knowing that if somebody comes in a bad mood, you know what I mean? Like, be empathetic. They might come across as being a bit of an idiot or a bit of an asshole, but really, like, maybe they just have something crap going on in the background, and you know, they might want
Just
you
their
to just hear
escape.
them out or listen to them. And you have to watch that you don't fall into that trap of like, oh, he's being an idiot. Like, what's he doing, or why is he saying that, or why is he being so grumpy because he shanked one shot, and like, it just might be something else. You know what I mean? So I think that is one of the biggest things for sure. And then kind of just awareness of working in teams. You know what I mean? A lot of what we did last week was kind of team focused, and for a golf pro where it's an individual session, it's like, okay, well, how could you make it a team thing? Like, can you bring a fitness trainer into it? Can you make their experience a bit better? Can, for our place, can the guy bringing them down on the buggy make it a little bit better? Like, how do you coordinate everybody together and make them all feel part of a team? And I think that's really, really interesting. And then I suppose the second thing, like me and our head chef, Dirk, who's a great guy. I know this is bizarre, but the last speech that the guys at Satanta gave us was basically built around Toy Story, and he used the example of Andy's room in Toy Story. And he's like, look, the toys in Andy's room, that's their comfort zone. And he's like, when they look outside, it just seems crazy, like dogs trying to eat them and do this and that. It's completely out of their control. And he goes, but imagine everybody looking in. And he's like, imagine how crazy it is seeing a load of toys talking to each other. He's like, everybody think it's mad in there. Like, what's the story of Andy's room? It's a nuts place. Like, and he's like, it's just all about perspective. And again, to go back to Dirk, I ended up telling him this story because he's asking how the course was. I was like, gave him this great big speech in it. And he goes, oh, yeah. He goes, I've heard a story about that before. And he started explaining this, one of the, I can't remember which one it was. It was Plato's Cave, it's called. And basically he tells this story about these prisoners who are looking at a wall and there's a fire behind them, and guys going with like models of a horse, and they think there's a horse there and that's real, and that's, and then one prisoner escapes, gets outside and actually sees the real world and comes back and tries to tell the guys what it's really like. And they just don't believe him. They're like, you're lying, like, this is the real world. And then he started linking that to like modern day, and he's like, yeah, it's our phones, right? Like, you go on Instagram and you get told exactly what's going on in the world that you want to know what's going on in. And he's like, you probably just go the further down a rabbit hole you go. So if you're a Fine Gael supporter, everything that comes up is about how good Fine Gael is and how bad Fianna Fáil is, and you just see that one side. And he was like, same story. We started looking into this, and he started going Matrix, blue pill, red pill, and you're like, that is interesting. So like, trying to see the perspective of somebody else in any situation, like, I find quite interesting. And again, when it goes back to coaching, it's like, somebody walks in with a problem, it might not necessarily be their golf swing. It might just be they need a cat. Then you go to the elite performance and you go to the best in the world. It's like, how do you make them perform better? Well, maybe if they're a bit happier, maybe if, you hear them out and they give out about their girlfriend or their wife or both. You know what I mean? Like, you just, it's trying to get on people's wavelengths, right? And I think the better you are at that, the better you are at coaching anything. And I was listening to Elon on your podcast last week, and I actually messaged him after. It was cool to see, where he's come from, because obviously I haven't dealt with him in years. I don't know anything he was doing. And I started looking at some of his newsletters on LinkedIn after, and started listening. I was like, he's done a really good job of this. And I just started to look at things I could steal off him. Like, you know what I mean? He's got
ideas.
Seriously, I'll happily admit, I steal loads of bits off him. But, you're kind of looking at it going, like, is there anything I can, steal from him? And he seemed to have a really good understanding of, like, just getting on people's wavelength and, some of the specialisms he's going into. And you're like, it's really, really cool to look at. So, I think from a sports psychology side, I find that super, super interesting. And I think you kind of start to spot these things within it. And, it's a cool route to go down.
Brilliant.
Class, yeah. When you did your PGA, Jamie, do you feel like the PGA stood to you as you went around the world? Like, you've obviously done Dubai and Portugal. Do you feel like you needed to do more after that, like doing different courses and training?
Yeah, well, I remember giving you this answer when you were going to do it. Like, to me, the PGA is basically like an arts degree. Like, I look at that, like, you go in and you get to try a few different subjects. Like, I don't see it as a golf degree. I see it as it's a part business degree, part coaching degree, part rules degree, part equipment tech degree. And then once you're finished, you have to choose which route to go down. And then that route you've got to figure it out. And some people don't. Some people want to be a club pro, and they want to be okay at all of it, and they might need to do smaller courses and just keep upgrading the information. Some people want to be a coach, and they have to go further down that route. There's no option. You have to seek out more information and seek out more stuff. And yeah, I think it's a starting point. Like it's not the end product for anybody, and nor should it be. It's like anybody who's really good at what they do, and especially in golf, like they just keep searching. They keep looking for a little bit more and just a little bit of better information. And does somebody know how to do it a little bit better? Like, Butch is a great example of it. I remember a few years ago, he did for Golf Digest, he did a thing with George Gankas where he went and got a golf lesson off George Gankas. And I remember thinking, this is just for show. Like, this is just purely, he's going down, take a few photos, write a story, looks great, whatever. No, he actually, he was working on what George had given him. And you're like, they're not two coaches you particularly put together. But you're like, he's just looking for more information. This is Butch in his probably 80s. And you're like, he's still looking to learn more. And I think that's, the PGA to me, it's, I said this to you when you asked me, should you do it? I was like, it's still one of the best things that I ever did because I wouldn't be here without it. I never would have reached this level without it. And, I'd always recommend it to people who want to do it. I think it's super helpful and it's a great starting point, but it's a starting point, and that's it.
Brilliant.
Yeah, 100%, yeah. If you were setting up an academy yourself, Jamie, how would you structure? I know Liam worked at UGP in the States. He got a nice taste for how they structure things, and they had fitness and stuff there as well, didn't they, Liam?
Sounded similar to what Jamie was saying with the holistic approach.
Yeah, would you structure it the same kind of way now, Jamie? Would you because I know where we work, we do coaching, they do a thing called swing evaluation. So the first lesson is see where you're at, what your goals are, that kind of thing, get a nice overview. But we don't do the fitness side of it, like you or the TPI and that kind of thing. Do you think that's really, really important to do in the first couple of lessons? Or
yeah, look, I think again, you think holistic, you can go down any route, and I think you've got to use what's available to you first of all, and then figure out ways potentially around the rest. So, if you use fitness as an easy example, okay, it's lovely if you have a facility like we have where you can have, a golf pro teaching, and then if there's something wrong with the body, I'll just Ali, come over here. I need you to look at this, and he'll go into detail on it. But if you don't have that, TPI level 1 is great because it lets you screen them and figure out what could be wrong, what moves, what doesn't. And then you've got a couple of options. Option 1 is you look at what they can't do and you go, right, I've got to work around that in some way. So your awareness for the lesson is better. Number 2 is you can go down the route and fix it. So, option would be, obviously you could give them some basic exercises from the app, which will never really do any harm because everything's banded. It's very simple. Or maybe you've got a physio that works next door down or down the street, and you just call them and you go, look, I've got this guy in, he really wants to improve his golf, but his left hip is super tight. Would you be able to see him and give him a massage or tell him what to do or, recommend it, or same with a trainer? And you've got this network of people. Same with psychology, when I've worked with players, I never really dealt with any of the major psychological stuff. So I just always had Carl Morrison speed dial, and anybody who was really struggling, I just go, call this guy, he'll do it. And that was just the way we worked. And Carl obviously couldn't tell me anything that was going on, but he could tell me games and drills that he would like to see, or he'd ask me, keep an eye on the routine, or have him working on this. So you end up with this really great network of people who aren't working with you, but they're making you look better. Because really, if that student goes down the road to the physio and their hip gets better, I can teach them better and their performance gets better, and then you look like a hero. So you're basically just trying to use what you have. And, sometimes that's able to be direct from your facility, and sometimes it needs to be with freelancers or people in other businesses that can kind of complement your own. So I think the more you know on it, the better it is to identify it, and then you can use the people around. If I have my ideal academy, it would be similar to what TPI have, where you've basically got, a golf pro, a biomech guy, a physio, you've got a psychologist there, you've got you've got the full team, and at any one time you can pick from them. I think that's super powerful. I think to have something like that, but making it function, making it as a business, it's not easy because it's a lot of people to pay the salary of. You kind of just have to make it work as best as you can, really.
Great answer. Yeah, that's interesting.
Well, I was going to ask you, if Jamie 15 years ago walked in the door now, what would you say to him?
Chill out, it'll be all right. It's, I listened to somebody earlier on, and their answer was like, I probably wouldn't tell them anything because it'd change how the outcome was. I'm quite happy where I am. I look at things that I've been through and gone on, highs and lows, from everything from golf to life to going back again, and I think it just goes up and down, and I think that's normal. You know what I mean? And Dave Carney wrote a book, and I think it's called The Golfing Buddha, and it's one of the best books you'll ever read. But he goes through like the kind of Buddhism theories, and it's like, I think rule 1 was there will be suffering, and rule 2 is suffering will end. And I think that pretty much could cover anything from golf to whatever. And I think it's a good thing to have in mind if you're really on a high. Like, sometimes there will be bad things that'll happen, and if you're on that low, then it's going to end at some point. All you have to do is just keep moving forward. If you're dropped in a forest and you stay still, you'll die. So you got to move somewhere. It might be the wrong direction, but you'll figure out it's the wrong direction, and at least you can move the other way. So
Brilliant.
I think it's all about, just deal with what's in front of you as best as you can and just keep moving.
Do you think you would have had as much success if you stayed in Ireland, or do you think that was quite important?
I think travel, looking back on it now, I think travel is really important, and it doesn't need to be live abroad, but I think seeking out people in a wider network.
Okay.
So because there's still some of the best coaches I know, like in Ireland, like I've mentioned Dave a couple of times, like Donald Scott, somebody I look up to massively. Donald was in my year in the PGA, and I look at some of the stuff he's doing. But he's traveled, he's gone to, I think it's Norway he was coaching, and like he's traveled around the world following different people, and he's studied, and like I say, I don't think there's one rule. I think there's some brilliant coaches that stay at home and they're good at understanding, and then I think there's brilliant coaches who go abroad and kind of figure out things. And I just think as long as you keep a broad, open mind to things, I think that can be as good as traveling. But I do tend to find that people who are willing to travel are probably a bit more open-minded. And I think that's why we see that as like, travel and you'll find it. But no, if you kept an open mind and you research, you'd probably find it too. So I think it's kind of more the open-mindedness than necessarily physically traveling.
Gotcha. Yeah, just to kind of close then, Jamie, I don't know if you have any questions, Liam, yourself, but do you? Can you hear me?
No, I'm fairly good now because I'm afraid this is going to go on me again.
Yeah. Okay. What's your North Star, Jamie? What do you see yourself in the next 10 years and 20 years? And are you going to continue coaching, or what's the end?
I can guarantee I'll be coaching. I love coaching.
Brilliant.
Now,
right.
After that, I don't really know, and it's something I've been tossing around. I suppose I used to always say I wanted to be better than Butch. And that was always a line I used. I wanted to be better than Butch, and How do you know if you're better than Butch? What's the measure? That's exactly the question I'm coming to now. Is like I don't think and the realism of it as well. It's like you realize how good he is, but I think. I suppose the thing for me is just to enjoy what I do day to day. If I come in and I enjoy what I'm doing, I'll be happy. You know what I mean? I think
Brilliant.
I used to chase goals and chase results a lot, and that only kind of goes so far. So kind of I've changed a little bit of that recently, and I think if I'm able to show up to work every day and enjoy it, I'm like, you can't really ask for much more, can you?
Yeah.
No, that's great. It's the process of every day getting gradually better, but if you enjoy it along the way, like making your Mrs. Smith enjoy your lesson and come back, it's the same thing for you. So I like that analogy.
Definitely helps.
Well done, Jamie. Keep going. You're doing amazing.
Yeah.
We're all flying the Irish flag from all different 3 parts of the world.
I would say likewise. Since I came across your podcast and I've listened to 3 since last week, I've really enjoyed it.
Oh, fair play.
That's good.
Thanks.
That's good. Well, you're number 10, Jamie. So this is the big one. It's double digits. But thanks very much for everything, and keep going. You're doing great, and thanks for sharing your knowledge.
Pleasure, lads. Thank you.
clinging to every.
Thanks for coming on, Jamie.
Yeah. Thanks very much, and we'll chat again soon, hopefully in person, maybe in the Emerald Isle. And yeah, thanks very much.
Brilliant. Thanks, lads.
Cheers.
Cheers.